Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. Welcome to the second lecture of TEFL 502. Today it's very important lecture. In the first lecture we talked about TEFL, we talked about method, and today inshallah we'll be talking about one of the methods. Before I proceed this lecture, I want to go back to my previous lecture to give you a review of that lecture. So dear students, we were talking about TEFL. What does TEFL stand for, by the way? You remember that? Yes, teaching of English as a foreign language. Very good, very good. So yes, it means you paid attention to that lecture, you listened to that lecture well, that's why you remember. Also, I gave you some other acronyms with TEFL. I want you to go through those acronyms as well. You may be able to know other acronyms. For example, one was TESOL, teaching of English as a second language. There was another acronym that was TAL, teaching of English as an additional language. So there are some acronyms. I want you to go through those slides and see what are the acronyms and what do those acronyms stand for. Come to today's lecture on TEFL, on GTM, grammar translation method. This word method might be confusing for you. So before I start this, I want to discuss this word method. And which context, students? Yes, TEFL context. That what does this word method mean in this context? So students, method is what? What comes to your mind? What is it? If I ask you a question, can you think of? Yes, procedure. Okay, a process. All right. Yes. Okay. So dear students, method is what? In fact, a specific procedure. Yes, for accomplishing or approaching something. Are you taking notes? Yes, you can take it. But this definition you will find on the slide as well. So I repeat for you that method is what? It is a particular procedure for accomplishing, for completing something. And particularly when you talk about a method, we keep in mind systematic approach. So in other words, we can say that method is what? It is a procedure, it is a way to complete something, to complete a system in a systematic and what? Established way. So this is what the method is. Now in this course, which course? TEFL. Good. In this course, this method means principles, right? And techniques that we will employ to teach foreign language. So method means what? Method is what? Means these principles and techniques that we can use to teach a foreign language. So in short, we can say that the method is what? Combination of principles and techniques that we use, that we exploit in our language teaching. So in other words, maybe I said method consists of principles and techniques. Now you might be thinking that what are principles and what are techniques? Yes, it's a good question, students. You have every right to ask this question. Well, the word principle, you might have heard principle with PR. Principle, should I write this for you? All right, or I should spell it simple. Well, so if I spell it, what? How do you spell it? Principle. See here, See, principal. Who is principal? Head of an institution. Head of an institution. So with these spellings that we call Principal, principal, head of institution. But we will not talk about that principle. We will talk about Principle. So this principle means what? The rules. So here definitely we will be talking about the principles that any method needs for a successful language teaching. So what are the principles now for this particular course that we will incorporate? So here the principles involve different aspects of second or a foreign language teaching. What comes to your mind? Yes, you all know it, very simple. The teacher, the trainer. Who is the teacher, by the way? Yes, the one who teaches. And again, when we see in our context, we say the one who teaches a foreign language. TEFL teacher. We are students of which course? TEFL. So the principle, in fact, if we talk about the aspects of principle, so what are these? Teacher is the one aspect. The learner, yes, the learner means the student, the one who learns, the one who comes to an institute, the one who attends a seminar, a workshop to learn that language. So he is the learner. Then what is the teaching process? Which process that we use? Again, another aspect of this word, the principle. Then learning process. What is the learning process? How a student learns. And then what is the target language or the culture of that language? So dear students, these are what the aspects of, in fact, these aspects in fact make our principle. So these are the 5 aspects that you have seen make your principle, in fact. Now again, if I move on to it, see, now these were the 5 aspects that make a principle. Now you might be thinking that what are the techniques? So dear students, in fact, techniques are what? Techniques are the activities that we use in the class. Clear? So I hope you are clear about this word method that is important, and we talked about these methods in our previous lecture. There are 8 methods, and today in this lecture we will start grammar translation method, and also we will move on to 3rd lecture with the same method, that is GTM. So here, if you see your slide, there is an image. I hope you're clear about this image. So in this image, what is it? There is a teacher. And what is he doing? He is teaching. Teaching what? Yes, he is teaching English. So see, the students are there. Yes, and the students are paying attention to the teacher. Teacher teaches them. So this image tells you a lot that we are going to talk about a method today. Which method? Do you know it? Yes, this method is grammar translation method. So here is what, before we start this method, I want to talk more about the previous things that we discussed. We talked about TEFL and what is the scope of TEFL. Very important, students, that TEFL is very important area for your career. So again, I want you to do this subject well, to put efforts in this subject so that you may be good language teacher, you may be good language trainer. There is scope for TEFL teachers in the local market and also in the international market. But for that, you have to be very, very good in these skills. You need to do research. you need to know TEFL methods, and also you need to practice a lot to be a good TEFL trainer. So for that, yes, this course would definitely help you, in fact. And in the last lecture also I gave you the contents. I talk about different methods. I talk about 8 methods. I just gave you the names of those methods, and today onwards we will talk about these methods. Again, I gave you the books that we will follow in this course, and the first book is that we will start with is what techniques and strategies for language teaching by Diane Larson. If you refer to your book content in the previous slide, you will find out there is a list of books given, and I highlighted those 3 books that we will try to follow in this semester. So students, I hope you're clear about this thing. The previous lecture, you have prepared your notes, you read the first chapter on introduction, so you are ready. Once you have done this first chapter, I hope you will be able to move on with the next chapter that we will start from today onwards. Dear students, it's very, very important that before we start the next lecture, students should be clear about the first topic that we have done. These all topics have been arranged in an order that one topic is linked with the other topic. So don't leave things so that you will do at the end. No, go on with the things in an order, so that once you move on to the next lecture, the previous concept should be in your mind, because all these topics are linked. Let's start now our grammar translation method. Yes, by the way, what is it? What is GTM? What is grammar translation method? If you see this word, grammar and translation, something comes to your mind. Yes, there's a grammar and there's a translation. Yes, it's your good guess. You have guessed it well, it is a method that focuses on what? The grammar. That focuses on what? Translation. So yes, you're right. You are absolutely right. That a method which focuses on grammar and translation. Again, I can see somebody is not clear about grammar. That what is grammar? Okay, yes. Well, students, the grammar is what? Grammar is rules. So who gave these rules? Generally, in fact, native speakers. They gave us these rules, and we being second language learners, we follow these rules. So grammar is what? Rules, combination of rules, in fact. So coming to it, this translation, yes, we translate one language to another language. We translate Urdu to English, and of course sometimes we translate Punjabi to Urdu and Urdu to English. So this translation goes on, in fact. And this method, that is GTM, talks about this grammar and translation. Again, if you talk about this GTM, that what is GTM, by the way? Well, students, it is one of the oldest methods. A methods when technology was limited, when communication was limited, when transportation was limited. So then, in fact, now if you compare this present era, we are in the age of globalization. We are in the age of information technology. But think of the time when these things were limited, in fact. So when these things were limited, then of course this method was in, and that method focused on the grammar and of course translation. So see, what is the definition of this GTM? You see, a method of foreign or second language teaching which makes use of what? Translation and grammar study. Like the name itself says, as the main teaching and learning activity. So this is very important, very clear. Whenever you hear this term, somebody talks about grammar translation method, so immediately this idea should come to your mind that it is a method. Method for what? For teaching, in fact, for teaching foreign language, and which stresses on the grammar, and second, translation. So this is what I told you, it is one of the oldest methods, century-old methods. In fact, one things were not as fast as they are now. Now things have changed. There was a time that interaction between people was limited, in fact. Now things have changed. So that's why this GTM was in then. And also that's why we call it classical method, the old method, in fact. So why we call it, in fact, classical method? Because this method, in fact, used earlier, in fact, classical Latin and classical Greek, right, was in fact the classical Greek and classical, you could say, the Latin, these were the reservoirs of knowledge. So in fact all this European literature is in fact derived from this classical Greek and classical, you can say, Latin. So the point was, for these classical Latin and classical Greek, this GTM was in. GTM was in. So that's why, of course, this was the method. Which method? Grammar translation method. So, but these classical languages were taught in Europe through this method. The classical Latin was taught through this method. Similarly, classical Greek was taught in Europe through this method. Then what happened? In the 19th century, it began to be used to teach modern languages, French, German, English. So still, if you talk about the modern languages, which era? In 19th century. What happened? These modern languages, of course, still they have been, GTM was used to teach these languages. Originally, in fact, the method was designed for teaching classical Greek and classical Latin. But in the 19th century, yes, for teaching modern languages, again, that method, of course, the teachers, the practitioners followed the same method, and it is still being used today. If you see, around in your schools and colleges, universities, yes, still people use this grammar translation method. Again, why people use this method? It is debatable. Teachers of the language feel that we can make concepts clear of our learners in this language, the language one, or we call it native language. So since in this grammar translation method, we will see later on that what are the principles, what are the strategies for this method. So originally, in fact, this method was designed to do that. Now, what is the purpose of this method? This is very important, the area, that what does this method do, in fact? Why? People preferred using this method, and what was the intention, what was the goal of using this method? So the first one was that this method helps students read and appreciate what? Foreign language literature. Right. Once you read any passage from any literary text, so what happens? That through this method, because students read that passage and they come to know about that literature. If you read an excerpt from Shakespeare, an excerpt from Wordsworth poetry, in fact, so what happens? So you in fact, you read and also you appreciate that literature. Second, the purpose of this method was, again, we have been talking about to know grammar, and again, grammar of the target language. This was another purpose of this method, that once you teach language through this method, to grammar translation method, so this helps us, in fact, what? To know grammar of the target language. Again, another purpose was the better know the grammar of the native language. People thought that once if you learn this target language, to learn the grammar of that language, it helps you also indirectly to know the grammar of native language. Because mind you that, of course, this grammar translation method, the focus was not on communication. Focus was just on what? To know literature of that language. Well, students, so this was another purpose of this, the method, the GTM we call it, that the learner would be able to read and write their native language better. By learning the grammar of the target language, that language that we are going to learn, indirectly the learner would be beneficiary. He will be learning to write and speak his native language. And again, since this method talks about grammatical exercises, it focuses on grammar. So by learning the grammar, the mind of the learner broadens, the mind of the learner opens. So these are some purposes of what we call it grammar translation method. What are the purposes, students? Yes, you can know literature of foreign language, you can appreciate literature of foreign language, and again another purpose is that you will be able to speak and write your native language well. See, this was the purpose, that learn the language, second language, learn the target language, so that you may be able to communicate in your native language. This was another the purpose. And obviously, of course, that intellectual growth. What is intellectual growth, by the way? Do you know it? Yes, intellect. You grow your mind. What? You learn things. Physically, we all are growing, my dear students, but yes, definitely, we have to grow intellectually. I always say, grow your upper story as well. And how can we grow intellectually, by the way? What is intellectual growth? Reading, yes, good. Observation, writing. These are what? There are skills that help us in our intellectual growth. So, dear students, move on. We have this one, that in fact a class, sample of GTM class. Now what is a GTM class? Yes, do you know what is GTM, students? Yes, I hope you know it. Grammar Translation Method. It's an abbreviation that we use for GTM is an abbreviation for Grammar Translation Method. So here the class that you will see in your textbook as well, that there's a class of 42 students. How many students? 42 students are there, and the level is high intermediate, and the class duration is 2 hours, and mind you, they meet for 3 times a week, you could say, 6 hours a week class and 24 hours a month. And then setting is Colombia. It's an ideal class setting, and of course their mother tongue is Spanish. Well, you could visit a class in your vicinity, in your area, where you will find different levels. You will find 50 students in a class, particularly in the public school system or public colleges. You will find more than 42 students, and then they might meet 3 days a week, 1 hour every day, or they might meet twice in a week, so it varies. And then setting would be our local setting, and then here the mother tongue would be what? The Urdu. But in this, the book that we are following, you will see in the first chapter, that is an ideal class has been shown. There the students are sitting, there are 42 students, and the teacher, the strength is more than what we call it 42, and then level is high intermediate, in fact. Here, student, so this is what the class is in front of you, that well, students are sitting. How many? 42 students are there, right? And then how many times do they meet in a week? Yes, they meet 2 hours every day, which means they meet for 6 hours every week, and setting is what? The Colombia, in fact. Now, how does the class proceed? Once you will read that chapter, you will find out that, well, students are reading a passage. So now what is a passage? Where has it been taken? So it is what? Life on the Mississippi, by who wrote it? Mark Twain. So this is a passage. Students are reading there, and then again, yes, translation from English to MT. Now what is MT, students? Do you know? M for mother, T for tongue. Okay, mother tongue in fact. It's an abbreviation for mother tongue, MT we use it. We'll be using in our other course as well. So there is a translation from English to MT, mother tongue. Example, maybe in our scenario, what do? We translate from English to Urdu. Then again, there is what? In the class, what is going on, students? Yes, generally word meanings, right? English to Urdu, English to Spanish in that context. So word meanings are there. And then again, there is oral what? Comprehension discussion. Again, discussion is in mother tongue, right? किसमें डिस्कशन हो रही है? मदर टंग में, अपनी जुबान में, नेटिव लैंग्वेज में. सो डिस्कशन इज गोइंग ऑन इन मदर टंग. लाइक आप जिस तरह हमारी सोसाइटी में आप देखते हैं कि इन आवर क्लासेस जनरली टीचर्स यूज दैट मदर टंग इन द क्लास. सो मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम they are following the grammar translation method in fact. Then again, teacher provides answer and meanings to difficult item. Again, the teacher, here the teacher has power. What he does? Teacher, he provides information, he provides meaning to words, he provides answers in fact to the question. So teacher is there. And then again, there is written comprehension. Students are given a passage, and of course, after reading that passage, what students do? They in fact answer the questions, and those answers may be in that passage or that may not be in the passage. Sometimes students have to infer the answers, and sometimes they have to find out the answer from the given passage. And then the teacher decides which answer is the correct and which answer is not correct. Again, the teacher's authority. Whose authority? Teacher, because teacher is reservoir of knowledge in this method. Teacher is authority in this method. And then focus on the correct answer, right? So teacher emphasized the correct answer. When the teacher asks a question and the specific student, the particular student answers. So if the answer is correct, teacher appreciates. So dear students, in this way the class moves on, the class proceeds. What is on? Reading passage. You understand? Students read a passage. What is the passage about? Yes, it is on Mississippi. Life on the Mississippi. What is Mississippi? It's a hard to pronounce word. River, right? So Mark Twain, writer, short story writer. So again, there is what have you seen in this passage? The use of mother tongue, Urdu, Spanish. क्या हो रहा है? क्लास में मदर टंग इस्तेमाल हो रही है. Teacher asks question in mother tongue, in Urdu for example, and the students also reply in Urdu. So क्या है? एक method है जहाँ where you can use, where you use in fact your mother tongue. And even oral comprehension also, discussions also. So in this proceeding, what you must have seen that, well, there is in fact mother tongue is there, and the teacher asks question in mother tongue and the students also reply in mother tongue. So they are learning the target language, but they are learning it with the help of their mother tongue or with the help of their first language. So this is what I mean. If you see it, well students, so the class moves on, and what goes on there, right? What English words, right, that are given. I mean, there are a list of words which are given, and students are asked to locate their synonyms and their antonyms from the text, the text that they have read, and students are directed by the teacher to find out antonyms of certain words. And again, what the use of grammar. For example, for the direct object, in this the passage, you have read it. What did the grammar rule for the use of what is direct object, students? I gave him a book. Fine. Now I helped him. I helped him. So I is the subject, help is a verb, and him is what? The object, of course. So again, in this teaching method, there is what? The teacher is in fact trying to focus on this grammatical rule, and he is, what is he doing? He is teaching the students the use of direct object. The teacher does it. And again, what he does, of course, teacher provides them example. First, teacher gives them a rule, that this is the rule for this direct object, and then this should be the examples. So teacher gives rules and teacher provides them examples. And again, what teacher does, he in fact identifies separable and inseparable phrasal verbs from the text. What he does? Yes, he identifies. Who identifies? Teacher. Teacher is reservoir. Teacher is authority. He has power, right? So he does whatever he wants to. So that's why, right? What he does? He identifies what? Separable and inseparable phrasal verbs from the text. So you might be thinking, what is a phrasal verb? And what are separable and what are inseparable phrasal verbs? Yes, it's a valid question. You can ask this question. Well, verb, you know, what is a verb? One of the word classes. Yes, you can call it one of the parts of speech. Fine. Yes. So what is verb? Is an action word? Yes, you're right. Verb is an action verb. Then again, phrasal verb. The verb plus a participle. Clear? Word plus a participle. That makes a phrasal verb. And again, when you attach a participle with the verb, dear students, meaning of that phrasal verb changes. It altogether gives a different meaning. For example, if you say give, now give gives a different meaning. But when you say give away, now give away is what? It is a phrasal verb, and this give away has a different meaning, to distribute. Our principle, give away prizes to the best students. Now here I use what? This phrasal verb. Give in, give up. So all these are what? Phrasal verbs. So what teacher was doing, that he was trying to help students separating or identifying separable and inseparable phrasal verbs. Pick up and pick it up. When you say pick up my book, for example. So when I want to use the book between these two phrasal verbs, so I would say pick it up. Fine? So that's why the teacher is doing an exercise. And again, the teacher, the students fill in the blanks. In the class, there are some blanks at the end of the passage, and the students are required to fill in the blanks. So how do they fill in the blanks? Yes, they are provided with some phrasal verbs, and they pick those phrasal verbs and they fill in the blanks. A list of phrasal verbs have been given to them, and the blanks are given, and the students do this activity and they fill in the blanks. And again, of course, once they are done with these fill in the blanks, so what they do? Yes, I mean, all these activities what the students perform, they do it. How do they do it? They do it individually, in fact. There is no collective work, there is no teamwork, there is no pair work. So whatever activity, either it is fill in the blanks, is done, or other things, the students do on their own. Individually they do it. Well, students, so once the students have done with this fill in the blanks, so then they move on, And remember that what the teacher does in this proceeding, he helps students for 2 or 3 sentences, and other sentences these students do separately. 2 sentences, for example, the teacher helps them in the fill in the blanks for the first 2 sentences, and he asks them to do other sentences on their own, but individually, in fact. So again, at the end, of course, every teaching, every class, at the end, what do we have? We give a homework. We give a home assignment to the students. So in that home assignment, what happens? There is what? Memorization of translation of list of English phrasal verbs and idioms. What teacher asks them? Yes, you need to do what? You need to know the meanings of these idioms, and you need to know the meanings of these phrasal verbs, and you need to know the meanings of these idioms. And again, they are given some words where students are asked to make sentences. So again, here mean the students are given activities for memorization. They need to memorize those words. They need to claim those words, and that is given in the assignment, in fact. Alright, so once you have given the homework, then what happens after that? What are the follow-up classes agenda, of course? That's what, for the next class, what happens, dear students? Then again, translation. There is another passage, and there would be translation based on that. And then for the next class, the teacher wants to give them rules for direct object rule. Earlier we talked about that rule, and again that students should memorize those rules so that they should know how to use that direct object, and they should know how to use indirect object. And again, there is a practice of what? Grammar rules. Either it is present simple tense, either it is past simple tense, or either it is ing form, whatever, either it is forms of verb. So teacher, in fact, gives them the practice for all these grammatical rules through memorization. He wants the students to know these grammatical rules. And again, there is what? For example, use of irregular verbs. The teacher tells them that these are the regular verbs and these are the irregular verbs. And for the regular verbs, he tells them that we add ed with the past form and ed with the past participle form. So, but then he, after talking about these regular verbs, the teacher also talks about irregular verbs. Well, students, so in this way this class proceeds on. So what happens then? In fact, teacher gives them a passage and asks students to write a composition on that, and that composition could be on their ambition, right? That what is their ambition in life? Or again, the teacher can give them a passage and expects student to do translation, to translate that passage from one language to another. So students, well, this is the class. In this way this class proceeds. Which class? The grammar translation method class, in fact. Well, you may have many questions about this method, that why this method is in and why this method is successful. Again, there are some people who feel that this method, though it's an old method, but it has been successful. Why it is successful? You talk about, the people say that this native language really helps a lot, helps the learner to learn the second language. Why? Because once you use this native language in the learning of the second language, so you can learn that language well. Otherwise, it would be difficult for you to learn that language through other methods, direct methods, in fact. People say that, well, you learn a language for the sake of learning a language. People don't consider that, well, this language should be used for a particular purpose. Well, students, so this is what a typical class of grammar translation method, where translation is focused, where the grammar is focused, and where the use of mother tongue is there. the teacher teaches language with the help of mother tongue, and the teacher feels that he is power and he has authority, and what he knows, his words are the final words. And again, the students also expect that teacher should provide them the answer, and the students themselves, they don't use their intellectual power, they don't use their mind to answer the questions. Again, why it is so? Because the teacher restricts them. Teacher is full authority. He is the knowledge provider to the students, because he feels that he has everything, in fact. So dear student, if I ask you, dear student, that what is your viewpoint about this method? You might have been through the method, and still in our, of course, schools, exceptions are there, but still in most of the public schools, in some private schools as well, the grammar translation method is being used, where people feel that again, why this method is in, why don't we switch over to another method? The point is that people feel that this method is better than the other methods. Why? Because this method, people, the learning, people feel that you learn more through this method. Why? Because there is a use of language 1. The L1 is there, and L1 helps us a lot in learning the language 2, in fact. Why? Because you see, we see that if there is any problem, you can switch the code. You can go on to native language, in fact. And again, through this method, what do? You learn literature of local language, native language. You know the grammar of this target language, and also as far as the grammar of this native language is concerned. So, well, the method, talking about the grammar translation method, that we will see its flaws later on. We will see the principles that are important later on in our third lecture. But today, what we need to know, that the grammar translation method, what it does, it focuses on what? On mother tongue, in fact. Second, it focuses on the grammar. Again, you might be thinking that why we say that the grammar, the grammar is not important. Through this method, we can say that grammar is very important system of language. Again, because why? The grammar is what? Grammar, I told you, grammar is rules, in fact. Rules of that the language. Since the grammar is rules of language, and it was a classical view that if you want to know a language, you need to know the grammar, and without knowing the grammar, you cannot know the language. Now it's your, if I ask you this question, what do you think, by the way? Do you think grammar is important? Most of you would say yes, the grammar is important method. Why? Because see, from your class 1 onwards, your teacher, in fact, focused on grammar, and the teacher deducted your marks for the grammatical mistakes. So yes, you all have you all have accepted that grammar is very important method. We cannot learn a language unless we know the grammar. But again, now if you see that since our method, of course, most of our institutions are following this grammar translation method, and they focus on the grammar. How many of us can speak the language well? How many of us, in fact, communicate in this language confidently? So where does the fault lie? Does the fault lie with the method? All the fault lie with the learner, with the teacher, with the system. What's wrong with this approach, that after doing graduation, the students cannot communicate in this language? Maybe, of course, that the grammar is focused, and again that translation is focused, and of course we can be good at translation. We can translate things well, but when it comes to communicating, of course, in the target language, in different situations, we people struggle. Students, in fact, who have done their education through this method, yes, they may be good at writing, But when it comes to communication, when it comes to their oral expression, people are weak in that. They may be, of course, they know the grammatical rules. And again, the point is that the grammatical rules that you have learned in your childhood, in your early classes, how many of those rules still you remember? Because rules, yes, we have learned those rules. But the point is, yes, there aren't hardly people who know each and every rule, in fact, of that grammar. Because rules are there and we people violate those rules. So that is what, in fact, on the other side, if you see this grammar translation method, which focuses on the grammar and again the translation, as we see in the class. We see in the class what is going on, by the way. Yes, what is your observation in the class? There is a teacher, all right, fine, and there, what is going on? A passage is there, a simple passage, right? You might have seen, of course, that in our classes, like sometimes the teacher brings a passage, right? Teacher brings a passage, and what he does? He asks you to read, and we read, in fact. And again, how do we read? And even, of course, in this method, teachers do not help us in reading. Teachers do not tell us how to read. And if we mispronounce a word, teachers do not help us. Simply the way people, pronounce those words, they go on with that. Sometimes the students mispronounce the words, and even teachers, here, if the some teachers don't know, in fact. And if, a teacher knows, so he corrects, in fact. And sometimes even teacher pronunciation, of course, is not up to the mark. So that's what is going on, that the student reads a passage and then moves on. So maybe for 4 or 5 lines, the one student, Ali reads, and then 5 lines, of course, Zia reads, in fact. So this reading activity is there in the class. And once they finish reading, then another activity is there, for example. Again, which activity? Memorization. For what? For vocabulary items, in fact. So, the teacher, of course, feels that, well, once the student know these words, they would memorize these words and they would use them in their writing. Again, research says that whatever words you learn through this way, you may not use them in your writing. Fine, because you forget things. You students take it as an activity, as a time, for the time being activity, in fact. Students feel that, well, this is the activity for this particular subject. And again, when you talk about when they have to write an essay, so they cannot use those words in their essay. Why? Because they have crammed those words. And that learning that, of course, is done through cramming may not be productive one. And then we have seen that, of course, sentence making is there. And again, of course, here the sentences, the words are in the passage, and the teacher helps them in making a sentences. The words, the first word, for example, again the phrasal verb, give away. The teacher, in fact, makes a sentence. He, in fact, gave away prizes, for example. Then you have the word, for example, Mississippi. Again, the teacher makes a sentence for the students and the student take dictation. So this word is sentence formation. But again, who makes the sentence? Yes, students? The teacher. It means, who is the teacher here in this method? Yes, so teacher, in fact, again I would say that teacher is all in all in this method. The teacher is there, and again, when the question is asked, the one student replies. So again, it's an interaction between a teacher and a student. You understand? So yes, again the interaction is there through the teacher. Again, the rules are given. Grammatical rules. The teacher focuses on the rules, on grammatical rules, in fact. The teacher helps them. The teacher helps the students in their forms of the verb. Teacher tells them what are the regular verbs, what are the irregular verbs, and the teacher, in fact, helps them in the composition. Well, there is a composition, and you need to give introduction, and you need to give the body, and finally what? Conclusion, in fact. And again, there is a translation. And again, this all discussion goes on in mother tongue. So we see that, well, the mother tongue is, the role of mother tongue is there in this method. So if we move on towards the end of this, well, that what is GTM, grammar translation method? In fact, earlier, if I want to tell you again the definition that we said, that what is this method? I mean, if you see, students, well, there is definition in the name as well. See, it's a grammar translation method, in fact. So because why? The focus is on the grammar. Because yes, of course, since it is one of the oldest methods, so of course, in the ancient times, the grammar was given focus, grammar was highlighted, and people used to think that, well, the grammar, without grammar, we cannot learn a language. If you want to learn a language, you need to learn grammar only. So grammar was what? The central hub of the language. So then there was no focus, in fact, or limited focus was on other systems of language. That semantics is there, pragmatics is there, phonetics is there, in fact, but the focus was only on the grammar, on the rules. And that's why we saw in the proceeding that the teacher, in fact, gave them certain rules, and not only the teacher gave them rules, but also, in fact, he made students use those rules, in fact. And of course, the teacher was there, and in the class proceeding, he does everything. He gives them vocabulary items, he gives them the words, and he gives them the meaning to the words, of course. And again, the meanings in which language? Again, of course, the local, again, the meanings in the native languages are given. So we see that, well, a method which focuses on what? On grammar and then translation. So two are the key words in the method. What? The grammar teaching, and then what? The translation. And what is the purpose of this method? As you have seen, that, well, the purpose is to help students learn grammar. Grammar of what? Again, the target language. Another purpose was that once they learn in fact the grammar of target language, they will be able to know their native language as well. So again, we can say that dual purpose of this. Which purpose? The dual purpose of this is there. That is, this learning of this, using this method, in fact, helps you not only to learn the grammar of target language, but also your native language. And again, another purpose was that if you learn this language, so through this language, you in fact become proficient in writing and speaking your own language. And of course, you have seen the proceeding of the class, that, well, class was going on. We see the environment of the class. So where the 42 students are there, and then there was a passage is given to them. Well, students, again, you can, if you want to observe this method, you can visit any school nearby, you can visit any college nearby with the permission, if the teacher allows you. So you will find that somehow this method is being exploited, and there is a change also, but of course most of the time you will see that teachers follow this method, and they are of the view that this is the best method. Again, why it is the best method? This is again debatable. They feel that this method gives power to the teacher. This method does not challenge authority of the teacher. So since it doesn't challenge authority to the teacher, so we can say that this is one of the best methods. Again, the students, some students, of course, they are comfortable with their language. They feel that they learn it well. If you ask the students who are going through this method, so they would say that they are happy in this method. They are doing it well, and because this method, in fact, helps them in learning, and they feel that they learn their target language well. So I was talking about the purpose of this method, that why GTM is followed, and we had a discussion on that some teachers still consider this method as one of the best methods, because we can use mother tongue in this method, and mother tongue helps us a lot in learning the target language. This is what the viewpoint of those teachers who are still following the grammar translation method in their teaching approaches, and they say they have been successful. Again, it's a debatable thing whether they are successful or not. And when you see from the student perspective as well, so again, some students, because some students are happy with this method. Reason may be that, well, they have gone through this this method in our culture particularly, because from their school, in their schools, the teachers use this method, and they have adapted themselves with this method. So if we change the system, they resist. At higher studies, sometimes, you know, we move on to the other method, direct method of teaching, and those students, they resist. They find it hard to switch over to that method. And even that's why, of course, in the experience is that whenever the students they request for this method, that the things should be taught in their mother tongue. They need to know things, and they feel that, well, it is very easy to translate things. And again, translation is altogether a debatable thing, that you cannot translate one language to another language unless you know both the languages very well. It is very difficult to translate one language to another language unless you are familiar with the literature of that language, unless you are familiar with the other paradigms of the language. So it's difficult, and that's why we see in the proceeding of the class that the teacher in fact could not translate some idioms. Example, to kick the bucket. There is an idiom, in fact. Again, now if you translate it literally, so meaning is different. So to kick the bucket means to die, for example, pass away again. So if you translate this idiom, pass away, literally, so meaning is different, in fact. So that's why here the teacher was unable to give them substitute. That's why the translation itself is a difficult activity, dear students. So this is what mean the grammar translation method. We had a discussion on that. I ask you some question that, I mean, this method, you have listened to this lecture. At the end, my question to you is that, what do you think? Is it really a successful method or not? What do you think? Can you give me your views? Think for a while. Okay, all right. You mean it's good method? Why? Because you can use mother tongue in that. All right, his viewpoint. Yes, what do you think? Okay, yes. What Zia says, no, it's not a good method because we use mother tongue in this method, and we need to learn the target language. Again, yes, there are different views on this method, and once we'll proceed, we will see what are the flaws, what are the weaknesses in this method, and how can we overcome those weaknesses, how can we overcome those deficiencies. Again, if you see this course application of this method, the use of this method, it is more, you can talk about Korean culture. Again, the teachers in Korea, they are well versed in English grammar, but once they teach English grammar, they teach in their language, they teach in Korean language, in fact. So why again, why is it so? Why those teachers teach language in their language one? Because they are not well versed in this language. And again, why they are not well versed? Because they are part of this system. They are the product of this system, so they are unable. So it means there is a question mark. There is a big question mark on this grammar translation method. So once the discussion will proceed, we will see what are the question marks, what are the debatable areas, what are the points, what are the gray areas of grammar translation method that we need to look into and see what improvements can be done. And the people who are for this method, who feel that this method is still a good method and of course has been used successfully for ages, why do they say so? Why are of this opinion that this method is one of the best methods? Again, it is a debatable thing. People who feel that it is a good method. Why? Because it focuses on grammar. Why? Because it focuses on translation. And the people who are against this method, they have their reservations. They feel, well, the method does not teach the language that we have to learn. The method, in fact, makes use of the language one, and ultimately that language one interferes in the learning of language two. So again, again, see there are viewpoints from both sides: people who oppose grammar translation method and people who are for the grammar translation method. But particularly one thing you should keep in mind, that in the class, of course, that we have seen, the proceeding of a class where the students are there and their interaction between a student to teacher is there, in fact. And the activities we saw in the class, what there was comprehension activities, there were in fact essay writing was there, fill in the blanks were there, and then sentence formation was there. Yes, we all think, we won't say that these things are not useful. Sentence formation is there, but the point is that, well, through which context these activities have been discussed, and who is behind all these things, and what is going on, and how communication is going on in this method. Of course, the communication was in which language? Mother language. Mother tongue. In our case, we see it could be in Urdu language as well. So this is what that in proceeding we saw, that there was memorization. So again, you see, do you think that when you memorize words, can these words help you? I gave you an example of a girl, and what she did, that she learned dictionary by heart. Would you believe? उसने पूरी dictionary जुबानी याद कर रखी थी. And the point was, whenever we used to ask her a question, she was unable to express. वो अपना इजहार नहीं कर पाती थी. She knew all the dictionary words. She knew all. Every word of dictionary. Would you believe that she has learned all the words of dictionary? But she was unable to express, in fact. And at times she was very good at grammar. उसने grammar को भी बहुत. She worked really hard on grammar, and she knew each and every rule of grammar. But whenever she was supposed to say something, she could not. She used to struggle there, in fact. So again, that, of course, if you have vocabulary, like we see in the proceeding of the class, that, well, the teacher gave them a list of words, and the teacher was trying to build up vocabulary of the students. How? By giving them some vocabulary items. And of course, what students do, they learn those vocabulary items. So what do you think, student? Is it possible? Can you learn words? Like if I give you a list of 1,000 words and you learn all those words, can you do it? Is it easy for you? Yeah, again, you see, it's a questionable thing. But is it easy? Or first of all, you may learn all those words, but when you don't know the exact use of those words, what will you do then? So it will be difficult for you to apply those words again. So that's why when you see the word, so we see the use of the word in a particular context is important. And again, for the vocabulary, it is said that, of course, use a word or lose a word. If you want to retain a word for long, what you need to do, you need to use that word. But in the class proceeding, what we saw that, well, there were words, and students were asked to cram those words. And again, there was sentence formation was there. If you see the sentence formation, yes, the words were given and students were asked, right? Students were asked to make sentences. And then again, the students, they were given those words, and the teacher gives them what? Sentences. And with the help of a teacher, students make sentences. So this is what in the proceeding we saw, that these are the activities which are going on, how grammar was taught, in fact, and grammar was definitely the focus. And at the end, again, translation was there, translating a passage. And still, if you see around, that in our system at a graduation level, you see that in every exam of English, you have a question on translation, where you are expected to translate a given passage. At our intermediate level, yes, there is of course, in every year, the paper setter gives a passage from in Urdu, and he expects students to translate that passage, which means that still we, of course, this GTM is N, and even our textbooks, if you see our grammar books and all the books, so activities are designed accordingly. We are talking about your Punjab textbook or other textbook board. So in the textbooks even mean the activities are designed by keeping in mind this grammar translation, the method. Students are expected to translate things, and again they need to know how to translate. So translation again is focused, and again, like in our country, it is said that if you are good at grammar, so you can be successful. Whereas, of course, now we are moving into the new age where the grammar is one element of the language. It is not the only aspect of the language. It was in the old times, the ancient times, well, the grammar was given the focus. And because why? You see, because the literature that you have, the classical literature or Greek literature, the grammar, in fact, this grammar translation method was used to know this, the literature of that language. So that's why, you see, and nowadays, of course, if you talk about, if you see that the way we follow, the way we teach our students, is it a real success? Or, is GTM a real success or not? This we will see in the previous lecture. So, in the end, if I conclude this lecture, so today what we did, yes students, who would tell me, who would answer my question? Yes. So first of all, we talk about method. What is a method? Yes, what is a method, students? Method is a way, right? A procedure to do something, and how to do it? In a systematic way. Yes. So again, what do you mean by method in this course? Yes, method of teaching, in fact. And how many methods are there? 8 methods. Good. Can you name them? Good. Grammar translation method. Yes. Another method? Direct method. Other method? Suggestopedia. Other method? Yes. Community language learning. So all these are the methods, of course. You see, all methods are there. And then what are principles? The principle determines why. Why, of course, mean the teacher uses a particular activity and how? Why? Principle determines why something happens in the class. An activity shows how it happens. So again, we talk about the principles, and then in the principle, of course, we talk about 5 aspects. Remember that? Yes, learner, teacher, teaching process, in fact. So these are the aspects we talk about in the principle. And then we moved on to what? The method, of course, the grammar translation method. It's the method which is one of the oldest methods and still being used in our organizations. The method which focuses on the grammar, it focuses on translation, and again, of course, grammar is focused, translation is focused in this method. And the purpose was, what was the purpose of this method? The purpose is that through this method you can know target language, the grammar of target language, and also through this method you can speak and write your native language. So, and then we saw a proceeding of a class where a typical class of GTM was going on, where we see the students are 42 students are there. They meet for 6 hours for a week, and then we saw different activities in the class. We saw vocabulary building exercises. We saw sentence formation. We saw the grammatical rules. So all these things we saw in the class. So in the next lecture, we'll talk about what are the principles, what are the techniques which are effective for this grammar translation method. So before we close this lecture, I want to tell you that for the next lecture, you need to know these things. What do you need to know? That what is GTM, in fact, and what was the background of this method, of course, right? And then what is the purpose of grammar translation method, and what happens in this particular class. If you want to have a view of that, you can visit any class near your nearby institution and you will see this method. So thank you very much for this, students. See you in the next lecture. Thank you very much. It's goodbye.